The soft golden light of the Parisian afternoon filtered through the large glass windows of the sculpture studio covering the unfinished blocks of metal and marble with a layer of honey. I, Clara Moreau, a name now familiar to the international contemporary art world, stood silently in my own creative space. The sculptures my brainchild carried within them, the strength of molten and bent metal, the delicacy of meticulously carved marble veins, and the invisible scars of a troubled past. The doorbell rang softly, pulling me out of my thoughts. The studio manager brought in a letter, a pale cream-colored envelope, the handwriting trembling familiar to the heart. It was from my mother, Sophie Moreau. Inside, a few lines of scrawled tear-stained handwriting recounted the mounting hardships the family was facing, the deteriorating health of my father Henri, and ended with a fervent, urgent plea for me to come home to forgive everyone. A sad smile crossed my lips. Home. That word home had been foreign to me for so many years. 18 years. A long enough time for an innocent young girl to become a mature woman, long enough for the wounds that seem never to heal to begin to heal. 18 years ago, these same people, my parents, believed the blatant slander of my brother Lucas, that I, their only daughter, was a despicable thief who had heartlessly stolen the family's sacred relic. They slammed the heavy oak door of the house in Lyon in my face, pushing a girl in her early 20s out into the street with empty hands, a broken heart, and an injustice she could not tell anyone. Now, when Clara Moreau's name has spread beyond the borders of France, when my works are displayed in the most prestigious museums, when my fortune has probably exceeded anything they could have imagined, they want this bad daughter back as if nothing had happened. Fate really knows how to tease people. My memory is not anchored in any particular tragic event that started it, but rather a series of smoldering days, small but growing cracks in family relationships. We lived in a lovely two-story house on the outskirts of Lyon, a model Moreau family. My father, Henri Moreau, was an architect of some renown in the area, a stern conservative man who placed great emphasis on traditional values and expected his eldest son, Lucas, to follow in his footsteps, or at least pursue a decent career like business or law. My mother, Sophie Moreau, was a gentle, kind woman devoted all her life to caring for her husband and children and to keeping the family together. She loved us, but her meekness and vulnerability meant that she rarely dared to speak up, especially when it went against my father's wishes. Lucas. My brother is 4 years older than me. He is the rich kid of the family and has been pampered by his parents, especially my father, since he was a child. Lucas was not really outstanding in his studies, but he had a sweet mouth and knew how to say sweet words to please adults. He studied business administration at a mid-level university as arranged by his father, but in fact, behind that elegant and obedient appearance was a completely different Lucas. A gambler who spent lavishly beyond his family's financial means, things that my parents were unaware of or deliberately did not want to know. What I felt most clearly from Lucas, although he tried to hide it, was a secret jealousy of me, of what he called my lucky little talent. As for me, Clara, at that time, I was a young girl in her early 20s with a heart full of life and a burning passion for sculpture. Since I was a little girl, I had been fascinated by shapes and materials that could be transformed by human hands. I would secretly knead clay in the garden, carve pieces of wood into strange shapes, or simply sit for hours looking at statues in the park, imagining their stories. My talent, perhaps a gift from God, grew naturally. I dreamed of studying at the École des Beaux-Arts in Paris, one of the most prestigious art schools in the world, to immerse myself in the creative world I had always longed for. But my dream was met with fierce opposition from my father: art sculpture. He frowned, his voice full of displeasure, at a family dinner when I timidly expressed my desire. "That's not a career, Clara. It's just a frivolous hobby. Girls should study accounting or teaching, stable, promising careers. I don't want you wasting your time and money on something that's not practical." My father often compared me to Lucas. "Look at Lucas. He studies business. After graduating, he will have a good job, high salary, can help his family. And you do. You intend to live on those lumps of clay." His words were like invisible knives cutting into my sensitive soul. Lucas, of course, did not miss the opportunity to add fuel to the fire. He often showed contempt for the small works I had painstakingly created, calling them children's toys, useless, ugly things. Once I discovered a small clay statue of a dancer that I loved very much, broken and lying in the corner of the garden. I knew for sure that it was Lucas, although he denied it with an innocent expression. His fleeting look of gloating could not escape me. My mother, Sophie, stood between the two bullets. She loved me, I knew that. Occasionally, she would secretly look at my works with affectionate eyes, even praising them as very soulful. But faced with my father's strictness and Lucas's obedience, she could only sigh, advising me to listen to father, not to make father sad. My mother's silence, her passive agreement, sometimes hurt me more than my father's fierce opposition. The conflict continued to smolder day after day like a growing tumor in the heart of our seemingly peaceful family. I felt increasingly lost and alone in my own home where my passion was considered something eccentric and shameful. The real tragedy struck one hot June afternoon. My father returned home with a murderous look on his face. Without a word, he went straight to the mahogany cabinet in the living room where precious family memorabilia was displayed. Then he froze his face, pale with anger and panic. The watch. "Where is Grandpa's watch?" my father shouted, his voice cracking. The antique solid gold watch with Roman numerals and intricate carvings was a priceless keepsake that my grandfather, a talented watchmaker, had left to my father before he passed away. It was not only of great material value, but also a symbol of craftsmanship, of family tradition, and of my father's pride. And now it was gone. The whole house was in chaos. My mother's face was pale. Lucas looked worried and kept asking questions, but I saw a strange light in his eyes, a calculation that I couldn't name. Suspicion quickly fell on me. Lucas, with a pained and reluctant look on his face, began to tell his story. He said that he had seen me acting strangely recently, often sneaking out at night and rarely talking to people. Then he accidentally mentioned that I had complained that I really needed money to buy precious stones and expensive metals for the sculpture projects I was nurturing. I don't want to doubt Clara, but... Lucas hesitated, looking at his parents with a fake guilty look. The other day, I saw one of her small carving tools fall near the glass cabinet, and when I also heard, someone saw a girl with a similar figure to Clara hanging around the antique district the other day. Lucas's ruse grew more and more elaborate. A few days later, he found a crumpled old pawn receipt from an unknown shop tucked deep inside an art book in my room. Of course, it was a perfect fake evidence that he had created. He also enlisted a fellow gambler who was also a bad guy to act as a witness, who accidentally saw a girl who looked a lot like Clara selling an antique gold watch at a shady antique shop in town. This witness testimony was convincingly recounted by Lucas to my parents. Many years later, when the bitter truth was revealed, I learned that it was Lucas who had lost a huge amount of money gambling and was pressured and threatened by his gangster creditors who had recklessly stolen his grandfather's watch. He sold it for a pittance to pay off his debts, then staged a perfect scene to blame all the blame on me, his sister, whom he had always secretly envied. He knew that my father already disliked my passion for art, so it was easier than ever to sow more suspicion and create evidence against me. He took advantage of my parents' gullibility, my mother's weakness, and my father's hatred for the path I had chosen. My father, Henri Moreau, a man who always valued honor and honesty, now looked at me with eyes of utter hatred and disappointment. He did not give me a chance to explain, to justify myself. All my words became meaningless before the undeniable evidence that Lucas had painstakingly arranged. "You thief." My father pointed at me, his voice shaking with anger. "You dare steal the sacred relics of your grandfather of this family just to pursue such useless, frivolous art. I was so wrong to give birth to a daughter like you. You have disgraced the Moreau family." I tried to scream in despair. "It wasn't me, I didn't do it. Dad, you have to believe me. Mom, say something. I swear I would never do that." I looked at my mother for help, hoping she would come to my defense, but my mother, Sophie, could only cry. She looked at me with pain in her eyes mixed with disappointment and helplessness. "Clara, my child," she choked. "Why were you so foolish? Money can be earned back, but family honor. You have caused your parents so much pain." My mother's words were like the final blow to my head. Even my mother, the person I had always believed in, and believed in my slanderous words. I felt completely broken, turned away from the world. Loneliness and despair enveloped my young soul. During that storm, none of my relatives spoke up to defend me. The Moreau family did not have many relatives nearby. There was an aunt, my mother's sister, who lived in another city. When she heard the news, she called home expressing her disbelief that I would do such a thing, but in the face of my father's determination and the evidence that Lucas presented, she remained silent. She did not want to interfere too deeply in her brother-in-law's family's internal affairs. The silence of those around me, or their tacit approval of my father's decision, made me feel like a sinner, condemned by society, even though I had done nothing wrong. My father's anger reached its peak. He no longer wanted to hear any explanations. To him, I had become a liar, an unfilial son, an indelible stain on the family. "Get out of this house," he roared, pointing at the door. "I don't want to see you again. You're not my daughter anymore. Don't ever come back here again. I don't have a thief like you as a daughter." His words were like sharp knives, stabbing straight into my heart, making it bleed. I stood there unable to believe what I had just heard. Being disowned by my own father, kicked out of the house with the harshest words. My mother, Sophie, sobbed. She held my father's hand, her voice trembling, begging, "Please, please. He's still young and immature. Please forgive him this time." "Forgive me," my father growled, pulling his hand away from my mother's. "Can you still defend her? She has done such a terrible thing. If I don't teach her a lesson, what other terrible things will she do in the future? I cannot accept a daughter who has ruined the family tradition and brought shame to our ancestors." My mother looked at me helplessly, tears welling up in her eyes. She didn't dare to disobey my father any longer. She quietly went upstairs to my room, took the old cloth bag that I used to use when I went to school, and quickly stuffed a few worn-out clothes and a few personal belongings into it. When she handed the bag to me, she pressed into my hand a handful of crumpled bills, probably all the cash she had in her wallet at that time, and a cold sandwich. "Go away, Clara," she whispered, her voice choked, avoiding my eyes. "Go away for a while. When your father calms down, I'll find a way to talk things out for you. Remember to take care of yourself." I looked at my mother, looked at my father, looked at Lucas, my brother, with a half-smile full of hidden meaning and unconcealed glee. My heart was broken into pieces. The pain of being wronged, the cruelty and indifference of my loved ones, made me unable to cry anymore. A numbness, a terrifying emptiness enveloped my mind. I didn't say another word. Silently picking up my cloth bag, I turned and walked out of the heavy oak door of the house that had once been my home, my whole world. The sound of the door slamming behind me was like the end of a bitter chapter in my life, and also the beginning of an uncertain, thorny journey ahead. That night, Lion was raining heavily. I wandered the wet, unfamiliar streets with no destination, no one I knew to rely on. Tears kept falling, mixing with the cold raindrops, soaking my soul. I was alone with an injustice I could not explain, with a few coins and a dark, uncertain future. My father's words, "thief," kept piercing my mind like a wound that would never heal. The first days after being kicked out of my house were the most terrifying days of my life. I didn't dare to contact anyone. I was ashamed and humiliated. The money my mother gave me was not much. I wandered around Lyon for a few days, sleeping rough at bus stations and hidden corners of parks, eating bread from charity. Finally, with the little money I had left, I bought the cheapest train ticket to Paris, the city of light, the place I had dreamed of going to pursue my artistic career, but now arrived in the most ironic and desperate circumstances. Paris was glamorous but also harsh. I had no family, no friends, no money. I had to do all kinds of jobs to survive, washing dishes in cheap restaurants in the Latin Quarter, cleaning short-term rental apartments, helping out in small handicraft workshops where I could be near the materials and tools I loved, even if it was just to clean. The physical fatigue was nothing compared to the mental pain, the homesickness, the injustice that tormented me every night. There were times when I was so desperate that I wanted to give up everything. But then, even in the darkest moments, the flame of passion for art in me still refused to be extinguished. It was like a strong life trying to rise from the barren land of despair. I could not let myself fall like that. I had to live, had to prove that my father was wrong, that I was not a thief, that art was not useless. That cruel accusation, instead of knocking me down, became a strong motivation, an obsession urging me to succeed. And then, as fate would have it, a chance came to me. One drizzly afternoon, as I was wandering through the Marais, an ancient neighborhood with art galleries and small workshops, I happened to wander into a small alley, and a familiar sound attracted me, the steady tapping of a hammer on metal. I curiously looked through the half-open door of an old but vibrant sculpture workshop. Inside, an elderly man, his hair as white as silk, his face benevolent but deeply wrinkled by time and hard work, was working diligently next to a blazing furnace. It was Mr. Albert Dubois, a talented but reclusive metal sculptor. Perhaps he saw my curious, yearning gaze. He stopped, looked up at me, a gentle smile on his lips. "Granddaughter, are you interested in metal sculpture?" I nodded timidly, not daring to say much. Mr. Albert invited me into the workshop and gave me a cup of warm water. We talked. I did not tell much about my tragic situation, only that I loved art and was looking for an opportunity to learn. Mr. Albert, with his experience as a person, seemed to see something in my sad but determined eyes. At first, he only let me do odd jobs in the workshop, cleaning, arranging tools, helping him with nameless tasks, but he always paid attention to me. He saw me often lingering after work, absorbed in admiring his works, or secretly picking up scraps of metal to try to bend and shape. Gradually, he began to teach me basic techniques, allowing me to use the leftover materials to create freely. My first works, though still clumsy and crude, showed a unique sense of form, a special feeling for materials, and a rich inner self. Mr. Albert saw in me a natural talent, a passion that needed to be nurtured. His wife, Isabelle Dubois, a kind and gentle woman, also loved me very much. They had no children, and gradually they treated me as their adopted daughter. They gave me a small room in the attic of the workshop to live in, gave me hot meals, and most importantly, they gave me love, trust, and an environment where my talent could develop. They never asked much about my past, about why a young girl like me had to wander alone in Paris. They only believed in the person I was and the hard work and honesty I showed. The days I spent living and working in Mr. and Mrs. Dubois' workshop were the happiest and most meaningful days of my life up to that point. I was immersed in the creative world that I had always dreamed of. I learned from Mr. Albert not only the sophisticated metal sculpting techniques, how to melt, forge, bend, weld, carve, but also the philosophy of art of life, of patience and honesty with myself. The long nights I stayed up by the blazing furnace, the rhythmic sound of hammers echoed throughout the workshop, the drops of sweat mixed with metal dust and tears of happiness when completing a difficult detail. Each work that was created was a part of my flesh and blood, a part of my soul. Under the guidance of Mr. Albert and the love of Mrs. Isabel, my talent blossomed like a flower that is properly watered. My works became more and more sophisticated, unique, and full of personal imprint. I love to combine the strength and roughness of metal with soft, graceful lines, creating expressive shapes that contain stories and deep emotions. I started submitting my work to small art exhibitions in Paris. At first, not many people paid attention to the work of an unknown young artist like me, but gradually my unique style, bold ideas, and skillful techniques attracted the attention of professionals and art lovers. A major turning point in my career came when my bronze sculpture, The Scar of Time, an abstract figure that evokes pain and rebirth, caught the eye of Chloe Vance. Chloe was a young but highly respected art critic and owner of Galerie L'Avenir, one of the leading contemporary art galleries in the Saint-Germain-des-Prés district. Chloe was deeply impressed by the originality, emotional depth, and technical virtuosity of my work. She saw in me a great potential, a new voice in the art world. Chloe Vance decided to organize my first solo exhibition at her gallery. It was a great honor and opportunity I never dreamed of. The exhibition, called Renaissance, was a huge success. Critics were full of praise. My work sold at high prices and were sought after by famous art collectors at home and abroad. The press wrote about me as a new phenomenon of French sculpture. From then on, Clara Moreau's name began to be widely known. I received many invitations to participate in international art exhibitions in London, New York, Tokyo. My works were displayed in major museums and included in prestigious private collections. I have my own studio, which is more spacious and modern, but I still keep a small corner of Mr. and Mrs. Dubois's old studio as a sacred place, a reminder of my roots. And I, Clara Moreau, the girl who was abandoned by her own family and falsely accused of being a thief, became a millionaire sculptor, a famous person in the art world. This success not only brought me fame and money, but more importantly, it gave me back my honor, confidence, and faith in life. Mr. and Mrs. Dubois, who took me in and guided me, are the happiest and proudest people. They are my true family, my strong spiritual support. Applause echoed throughout the grand auditorium of the Musée d'Orsay, one of Paris's most prestigious art museums. The opening of the contemporary art exhibition, Voix Féminine, which brings together the best works of the world's leading female artists, was a great success. I, Clara Moreau, was honored to be one of the artists whose works were selected to be exhibited and invited to speak at the ceremony. The media's flashbulbs were constantly flashing. Congratulations and admiring glances from colleagues, critics, collectors, and art lovers surrounded me. Amidst the crowd, a familiar sense of unease rose within me. My instincts told me that something was wrong. I glanced around, and then my heart sank. In a corner of the auditorium near the entrance were three painfully familiar figures: my father, Henri Moreau, my mother, Sophie Moreau, and my brother, Lucas Moreau. My father looked much older and haggard than the last time I saw him 18 years ago. His hair was white, his thin shoulders drooped, his eyes no longer had the stern, authoritative look they once had, but were instead tired and worried. My mother stood huddled against him, her face haggard, her eyes puffy as if she had just cried. As for Lucas, he still maintained his outward appearance with an expensive-looking suit, but his false confidence could not hide the restlessness and cunning in his eyes. Why were they here? In the middle of such an important event for me, my heart beat faster. Memories of the day I was evicted of the cruel accusations came flooding back stinging. Recently, I heard from some old friends in Lyon that my father's architectural firm, Moreau and Associés, was in the midst of a major scandal. They were being sued by a rival firm for design plagiarism in a major commercial complex project. The allegedly plagiarized design had very distinctive sculptural details and architectural lines that ironically were uncannily similar to one of my first famous metal sculptures, a piece called Origins, inspired by childhood memories by shapes I had seen in my garden in Lyon. I have never made public the original sketches for that piece, but Lucas, with his curiosity and fondness for rummaging through my old things, might have seen them. And perhaps in a moment of lack of ideas or on purpose, he borrowed those details to put into his father's design when he was still working as an assistant for him before he completely fell into gambling and debt. They came here perhaps not just because of my mother's begging letter. Perhaps they came to see my work Origin on display to find a way to resolve the lawsuit privately, or worse, to find a way to blame or exploit me again. Chloe Vance, my manager and close friend who had been by my side through every event, quickly noticed the change in my face and eyes as I looked towards the Moreau family. She placed her hand gently on my arm, her eyes showing concern and support. A whirlwind of mixed emotions swirled inside me. Anger, pain from the past, contempt for Lucas's actions, and a vague sense of sadness at seeing my parents' haggard appearance. But above all, there was a strange calmness, a self-control that 18 years of turmoil had forged. I was no longer the weak, vulnerable Clara who easily succumbed to injustice. I was Clara Moreau, an artist who had built her position through her own talent and determination. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice from shaking. I didn't actively move towards them. When Lucas tried to push his way through the crowd to reach me with a fake smile on my lips, I shook my head slightly to signal Chloe. Chloe, with her tact and determination, gently stopped Lucas. "I apologize," Sir Chloe said, her voice polite but firm. "Miss Moreau is very busy with guests. If you have anything to discuss, please contact our office later." Lucas looked embarrassed but still tried to say, "Clara, it's Lucas' little sister. Mom and Dad are here too. We need to talk." His calling me little sister made me feel ridiculous and disgusted. My parents stood behind me, their faces filled with confusion and shame. My speech came soon after. As I stood on the podium, looking down at the hundreds of faces listening intently, my eyes met those of my parents and Lucas. For a moment I wanted to say something about them, about the past, about the truth. But then I held back. This was not the time, not the place. However, during the press conference that followed, a sharp journalist who perhaps picked up on the rumors of the Moreau and Associés lawsuit and the coincidence of the names asked a rather sensitive question. Ms. Moreau, there has recently been news of a design plagiarism lawsuit involving an architectural firm with the same name. Your work, Origin, with its unique architectural lines, seems to have a surprising similarity to the disputed design. Can you share anything about this? The room fell silent. All eyes were on me and on the Moreau family who stood in the corner, their faces pale. This was my chance to tell the truth, to see justice done. I smiled a calm smile that spoke volumes. I looked straight into the camera lens, then my eyes swept over my father, mother, and Lucas. Thank you for your question. I began, my voice clear and coherent. Art, like architecture, requires genuine creativity, honesty with one's own ideas and emotions. Each work is a brainchild conceived from the artist's own experiences and concerns. My work, Origin, is no exception. It is inspired by deep memories and familiar images from my youth. I paused for a moment, letting my words carry weight. Copying someone else's ideas, whether intentional or not, is not only a violation of the law and professional ethics, but also a serious insult to art and to the artist who has poured his sweat, tears, and soul into the work. I believe that the truth will always be revealed in the end, and justice will be served. I didn't accuse anyone directly, but my words were enough for everyone to understand what I was implying. My father's face turned ashen. My mother burst into tears. Lucas hung his head, his hands clenched his shoulders, shaking. My statement, although not directly naming names, was like a time bomb. Soon after, newspapers and art sites reported the news connecting the events and strongly pointing suspicions towards the architectural firm Moreau and Associates. The evidence of similarities between my Origin and their sued design became clearer than ever when placed side by side and analyzed by experts. The plagiarism scandal at my father's company exploded in the newspapers. The reputation he had built as an architect was in danger of collapsing completely. The rival firm had more grounds to press its lawsuit. In the following days, my parents and Lucas tried to contact me many times by phone, by email, even by coming to my workshop to beg to meet. But I refused all of them. I didn't want to hear any more lies or excuses. Finally, unable to withstand the pressure from public opinion, the risk of bankruptcy of the company, and perhaps also from a belated guilty conscience, my father had to publicly admit his mistake. He admitted that in the process of designing that project, he had consulted some old sketches of Lucas who had worked for him for a short time, without knowing that those ideas were actually borrowed from my original sketches. He sent a public apology to me, to the public, and to his partners. Lucas, the real mastermind, although not directly present, could not escape responsibility. He was cut off from all relations by his father, condemned by society. His former creditors, seeing his name appear in the newspaper, also began to hunt him down. Lucas's life was shrouded in darkness and debt. Moreau and Associates had to pay a large sum of money to its rival and withdraw from the project. The company was almost bankrupt. My father, a famous architect, became a failure, losing all his honor and career. My mother was completely devastated. They lost everything, and that perhaps was the price they had to pay for the blindness, the injustice, and the lies they had inflicted on me 18 years ago. And me, I felt no joy. Only emptiness, a deep sadness. Justice had been served, but it did not bring me complete joy. About forgiveness and return. After many desperate attempts to contact me, I agreed to meet my mother just once at a small cafe, not at home, nor at my workshop. My mother looked 10 years older. She held my hand, tears in her eyes. "Clara, my child, and please forgive us. Your father, he knows his mistake. He is in so much pain. And Lucas, he has paid the price too. Please come back home. We can't live without you." Wow. I looked at my mother, the woman who gave birth to me, the woman I loved and trusted unconditionally. My heart ached. "Mom," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I've lived a different life for the past 18 years. I found my real family, people who loved me, believed in me, and supported me when I had nothing left. I thought of the Duboises, of Chloe, of the friends who had stood by me. I have forgiven what happened, not for everyone else, but for myself. I need to let go of the past in order to move on. But forgiveness does not mean forgetting, nor does it mean everything can go back to the way it was." As for going back, I shook my head. "I can't, Mom. That house isn't my home anymore. I've built a new life here in Paris with art, with people who love me. That's where I belong. I don't promise them financial help, especially with Lucas. I know that it won't solve the problem, it might just make things worse. They have to face and deal with the consequences of their actions on their own. The meeting ended in silence and my mother's tears. I knew my decision was cruel, but it was necessary to protect the peace and happiness that I had worked so hard to achieve. I continued my life with Exhibition's new art projects. The name Clara Moreau shined brighter and brighter, but behind that halo, I was still a woman with scars from the past. I look back on the journey I have gone through, from an abandoned, slandered young girl to a famous artist recognized by the world. The pain did not destroy me, but on the contrary, it became an endless source of inspiration for my art, forging me to become stronger, deeper, and more compassionate. I cherish the people who have stood by me through the toughest times, my Dubois family, who gave me a home, a belief, and a path. Chloe Vance, my friend and manager, who saw potential in me when no one else did. They are the jewels in my life. The scar on my heart will probably never heal completely, but it no longer aches, no longer haunts me at night. It has become a part of me, a reminder of the value of truth, of loyalty, and the magical power of forgiveness. Forgiving others, and more importantly, forgiving myself so I can move on with peace. Family is not just defined by blood. Real family is the people who love you unconditionally, believe in you when the rest of the world turns its back on you, and pick you up when you fall. And I, Clara Moreau, am lucky enough to have found my true family, a family built on love, respect, and trust. My future is still wide open, with new works waiting to be conceived, with messages of beauty, of truth, and of human strength that I want to send to the world through the language of sculpture. And I know that no matter what happens, I will never be alone again. When the truth about the old slander is revealed, and those who betrayed you beg for forgiveness in their time of need, is coldness the only answer? Should Clara give her blood family a chance, however small, to make amends and try to mend the rift? Or is focusing on the family that has taken her in and her career the best way to protect her hard-won happiness? Share your views and feelings about Clara's decision.